Imagine trying to understand the soul of a person from a fragment of bone, or to rewrite everything we thought we knew about history because of a single tooth. It sounds absurd, impossible, and yet this is what science dares to do. A shard of a skull, a charred fragment of wood, a rib cracked and fossilized by time. These are the whispers left behind by people who vanished tens of thousands of years ago. They wrote no books. They spoke no language we can decode. They built no cities, carved no monuments, and still, we know them. We know what they ate, how they moved, where they walked, and who they held dear. We know the structure of their knees and the burden of their lives. We even know who they loved across species, across time. From broken silence, we've built stories. From dust, we've revived memory. This is not fantasy. This is archaeology. This is the impossible puzzle we were never meant to solve, but somehow we do. In 2010, deep within the frigid silence of Denisova Cave in Siberia, a small molar was found thick, ancient, and no bigger than a dried bean. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. Just another fragment in a cave already full of bones. But this tooth carried a secret the world wasn't ready for. It didn't match Neanderthal. It didn't match Homo sapiens. It belonged to someone else entirely. Someone lost to time. Someone we didn't even know had existed. From that one Malarno skeleton, no skull scientists extracted ancient DNA, and what they discovered rewrote the human story. A new branch of the human family tree, distinct and previously unknown. We named them the Denisovans. They had interbred with our ancestors. They had survived in harsh mountain climates. And yet, they left behind almost nothing. No tools, no dwellings. Only traces, a finger bone, a few teeth, and a genetic legacy still found in the blood of modern people, especially among Melanesians, Tibetans, and Aboriginal Australians. All of it from a single tooth. No grand discovery, no golden tomb, no buried treasure. Just a tiny reliquand, the technology to listen to what it still had to say. Sometimes, history doesn't come from monuments. It comes from molecules. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. When the living fall silent, their stories don't vanish. They settle into bone. And bones, though silent, are never truly quiet. They bend, they bruise, they heal, and in healing, they record. A fractured arm that mended tells us someone didn't die alone. Someone set that break. Someone waited, fed, and protected. That one scar speaks of care, of community, of love long before written language ever existed. Worn knees speak of years bent in labor gathering, kneeling, walking endlessly across stone and snow. A cracked pelvis whispers of childbirth survived. The subtle compression in vertebrae tells us of age, of burden, of time, lived rather than lost. But bones speak in layers, and at the molecular level, their secrets go even deeper. Isotopes carbon, nitrogen, strontium themselves into the skeleton like entries in a geographical diary. They tell us if someone ate mostly meat or grains. If they drank from nearby rivers or migrated across vast continents. If their childhood unfolded in the chill of the highlands or the softness of coastal air. Even the femur, long and sturdy, holds clues to how someone walked. Were they swift, stooped, wounded? The enamel on their teeth reveals not only what they chewed, but when they starved. Bones don't lie. They are silent witnesses, but in the right hands, they become testimony. And through them, the long dead risen not as ghosts, but as human beings, enduring, real, remembered. It began with a speck dust from a fragment of bone buried deep in the earth. Not much to look at, just calcium, protein, silence. But inside that ancient dust, something miraculous remained. Ancient DNA. Fragile, degraded, and yet still holding echoes of lives lived tens of thousands of years ago. From that whisper of genetic code, science cracked open a doorway into time, and what we found on the other side was staggering. We, Homo sapiens, were not alone. We mated with Neanderthals. We mingled with Denisovans. And perhaps this still unsettles the field we touched: other forgotten branches of humanity. Ghost populations with no names, no bones, yet still present in our blood. Today, nearly every living human outside of Africa carries between 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. And if you're Melanesian or Aboriginal Australian, that number rises up to 5% Denisovan. These aren't just percentages. They are signatures, traces of encounters, of shared fires, of children born not from conquest, but from connection. It changes everything. Genetics no longer simply tells us the color of our eyes. It tells us that we are hybrids blended from forgotten loves and long extinct kin. Inside your cells is a record more honest than memory, a lineage older than language. Our minds may forget, but our blood remembers. And in that remembrance, the dead are not lost. They live on in us. You pick up a rock. You chip it once. You chip it again, not aimlessly, but with purpose. A strike here, a flake there. You're not just breaking stone. You're shaping an idea. To the untrained eye, it may look like debris. But under the microscope, those tiny flakes reveal something far more profound: angles, repetition, symmetry, signs of intention. And with intention comes intelligence. Every tool is a thought made physical, a solution to a problem, a plan carried out in flint and fire. Across the world, we found tens of thousands of these stone tools: spear points, scrapers, hand axes, blades barely longer than a thumb. They map ancient migration routes. They reveal hunting strategies. They even betray handedness left or right. The flake patterns don't lie. Some tools were reused and resharpened for years. Others were passed down, kept, protected, perhaps even taught like heirlooms. And some were found buried beside the dead. Why? Were they symbolic? Ceremonial? Did they belong to the one who now lay in silence? A final gift? Or a memory carved in stone? The tools may look simple, but the minds that crafted them were not. In each chipped edge lies a sentence. In each flake, a decision. And when we listen closely, we don't just find tools, we find minds reaching out through time, speaking not with words, but with stone. You can learn a lot from ashes. A simple circle of scorched earth, faint, blackened, buried beneath centuries of dust, can unravel lives once lived. It tells us that someone stayed here, long enough to build a fire, long enough to cook, to gather, to share warmth. Charred bones speak of meals once shared. Cracked by heat, split for marrow, their patterns reveal whether they dined on deer, bison, or hare. Charcoal logs whisper which trees once stood nearby, now fuel for survival. And layer upon layer of soot, etched into cave ceilings, reveals more than smoke. It records the passing of seasons. A calendar written in ash. But sometimes the fire gives up deeper secrets. Beneath the hearth, archaeologists find bones not scattered, not broken by animals, nor discarded carelessly, but placed, arranged. Infant remains laid beside stone tools. Charred adults positioned carefully, sometimes with ochre or ornaments. These are not accidents. At that moment, archaeology becomes something more. It becomes theology. We are no longer just looking at what people did. We are witnessing what they believed. Fire was not just utility. It was symbol. A portal, a farewell, perhaps even a prayer. Fire kept them alive, but in the end, it also guided the dead. And so, from ashes, we glimpse not just habit, but hope. Not just function, but faith. In 2023, from a remote burial site beneath the cold soil of Northern Europe, researchers recovered a single strand of human hair. No bones, no grave goods, no carvings or inscriptions. Just one delicate thread of keratin, thinner than silk. And yet, it opened a window to a world long gone. What they uncovered was astonishing. She lived nearly 20,000 years ago during the last ice age. She had light skin, dark eyes, and a genetic profile adapted to the cold. Her diet was rich in reindeer meat, with berries and root vegetables rounding out her meals. Inside her hair, scientists discovered genetic markers associated with enhanced pain resistance, perhaps a gift or a necessity from an unforgiving environment. She was young, likely healthy, and someone had buried her with care. All of that from a single hair. We used to believe only bones could speak. But today, with the power of proteomics and ultra-sensitive DNA sequencing, even hair becomes testimony. From just a few microscopic strands, we can reconstruct facial features. We can detect stress, trace illness, and read subtle signs of environmental exposure. This is forensic resurrection, and it's only the beginning. As our tools sharpen, the margins of the unknowable begin to shrink. We no longer need full skeletons to tell someone's story. We can begin with a fragment, a trace, a whisper. One hair, one life, one story brought back from silence. There are places in the world that defy explanation, caves that seem to hold time itself, like sealed vaults. Denisova Cave in Siberia is one of them. At first glance, it's just stone and silence. But dig deeper, and the earth begins to speak. Tools emerge from layers far too ancient to belong to Homo sapiens. Fragments of bone reveal strange combinations. Neanderthal jawlines paired with Denisovan molars. Then comes something even more unthinkable. The remains of a child. She was young, maybe 13, but her DNA told a story no one could have imagined. Her father was Denisovan, her mother, Neanderthal. They came from separate worlds genetically, geographically, and yet they met. They mated, and she was born. A hybrid of two species, two vanished lineages. She was not a metaphor. She was not a myth. She was real. We don't know what her people called her. We don't know what she believed or how she died. But scientists gave her a placeholder name, Denny. It's simple, modern, but it anchors her to us. It reminds us that she existed. Her bones were found thousands of years after her final breath. And still she speaks. She teaches us about connection, about complexity, about love across species. This cave shouldn't exist. The artifacts, shouldn't be there, but they are. And so is she. Not just a genetic anomaly, but a bridge, a daughter of two worlds. For all our science, all our tools, all our calibrated instruments, there are still things that elude us. The past whispers in fragments, and some of those whispers we simply can't translate. Who carved the first figurines from ivory or bone? What did they mean to those who shaped them? A goddess? A talisman? A memory? What message lay behind the red handprints pressed against cave walls? Were they signatures? Warnings? Cries for remembrance? And the flutes carefully hollowed from bird bone, found alongside the dead. Did they sing in joy? Or mourn in grief? Were they played by the firelight? Or at the threshold of burial? We can carbon date pigment. We can scan for tool marks. We can reconstruct airflow in Paleolithic chambers. But none of that tells us what they felt. And perhaps that's the point. Not everything sacred is measurable. Not everything meaningful leaves residue. Some things were never meant to be dissected. They were meant to be felt. A father's goodbye. A mother's lullaby. The wonder in a child's first step into the dark of a cave. Maybe the most important truths are not the ones we can prove, but the ones we share. And so we're left with these echoes of curiosity, of creativity, of mortality. They were like us, flawed, brilliant, and fleeting. And maybe that's all we ever needed to know. Every bone fragment unearthed, every ancient gene sequenced, every tool recovered from beneath millennia of dust, they all point to the same humbling truth. We were never alone. Homo sapiens did not walk onto the stage of history as the only star. We shared this world with others Neanderthals in Europe, Denisovans in Asia, and perhaps even still unnamed peoples in forgotten corners of the earth. They loved. They hunted. They buried their dead and cared for their sick. They sang. They carved. They made fire just like us. And yet, only we remain. Why? It wasn't because we were smarter, or stronger, or destined. We survived because we survived. By movement, by adaptation, by resilience, and by sheer, unpredictable chance. The fossil record doesn't tell a tale of conquest. It tells a tale of contingency. And yet, their presence lingers. In our blood, in our breath, in our cells. Neanderthal DNA flows through the veins of modern Europeans and Asians. Denisovan genes echo in the lungs of Tibetans, in the skin of Pacific Islanders. These are not the spoils of victory. They are inheritances. They are kinship. The others didn't vanish. They were absorbed. Their shadows walk with us not behind, but within. We are not monuments to their extinction. We are monuments to their survival. And in remembering them, we remember ourselves. Not as victors, but as descendants, as family. Science is powerful. It can measure the angle of a femur and reconstruct how a person walked. It can extract isotopes from tooth enamel and tell us what they ate. It can map ancient DNA and reveal where they came from and where they went. We know how tall they were, how strong, what diseases they carried, where their lives ended. But science has its limits. It can't tell us what they feared on cold, sleepless nights. It can't tell us what stories they whispered to calm their children in the dark. It can't reveal who they truly loved, or why they sang, or whether they wept, when the seasons changed. We can date the tools, catalog the bones, name the species. But the dreams, the prayers, the promises whispered at the edge of death, those aren't written in calcium or DNA. That's where we come in. Not as scientists, not as archaeologists, but as rememberers, as witnesses, as carriers of meaning. Because behind every jawbone is a voice. Behind every hearth, a memory. And behind every fossil, someone who mattered. We are not just discovering the past. We are completing it. We are what remains. And as long as we remember, they are not gone. They are simply waiting to be heard. If this story made you pause, if you felt something stir in your bones, if you now look at a single tooth with more reverence than before, then join us. Subscribe to Prehistoric Shadows. Because here, we listen. We reconstruct. We remember. From ash. From bone. From silence. At Prehistoric Shadows, we believe the past is not gone. It's buried. And waiting. We don't sensationalize. We don't mythologize without evidence. But we also know science isn't cold. It's reverent. Every fragment is sacred. Every fossil is a voice. Every silence is an invitation. We are not alone in this story. And we never were. Prehistoric Shadows, where memory is pieced together one echo at a time. Where history isn't dead, just waiting to be found.